Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today I have with me Vikrant. Vikrant is the founder of Acadspace Technologies, which is Google Map for careers. Vikrant is quite passionate about the EdTech space, and this is his second venture in this space. His first venture was Edvise, which got listed under top 20 out of 650 startups by Edupreneur Village. Beside this, Vikrant was also, as a management consultant, he has advised multiple EdTech companies while being at Redseer. Vikrant did his MBA from IIM Indore and chemical engineering from NIT Durgapur. So in this episode, we'll try to understand the life of an entrepreneur, especially in the early stages. What are some of the challenges an early stage entrepreneur faces and how he has been able to solve some of them. Also his view on the overall education industry in India. So very warm welcome to you, Vikrant. Thank you so much for joining in and taking our time. I understand that you have a large project with you, with people running all night outs and all. But I'm glad that you were able to take time out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vivek, for having me over here. And always happy to share knowledge wherever I can help.
Great. So Vikrant, I see that, you're quite passionate about the EdTech space, right? Generally education in total. So would love to start from your early life, right? How did education came in your life? How was your life growing up? Where were you growing up? How was your financial background? What did you aspire to become when you were young? I think, would be great if you can probably start from
sure.
there.
So I come from a very humble background, which is, my parents were very academically focused for me. They always enjoyed motivating me towards greater goals in terms of making academic success, and also experimenting more about what other things can I do. Like I remember we tried our hands in sports, art, and so much more. I think art worked really well for me. I got a lot of accolades in the past. And one thing which I also figured out in the process was I had this innate intent and innate excitement to solve complex problems which are related to more of intelligence or mathematics related things. So I had a knack for that, right? So all of this kept developing, and again, as I told you, right, we are from a typical middle class family, but fortunately my parents have been very motivating in their overall journey. They have always understood how hardships have actually come and gone. And irrespective of that, despite of that, their risk-taking appetite has always been very high. My father, after multiple years of service, he went into business, and he's now running his electric vehicle venture as well, very fruitfully. But back in my early days of childhood, so this is something I think not many people know, even at Redseer. But he's doing his EV startup very well, and now the trends are super hot on EV, so things are going well for him as well. But
Amazing.
Going back to my early days, the challenge was still about how do you open up the gateway to a much more financially lucrative life, right? Then therefore education was at the topmost priority, at least in my household, and I'm sure for all my peers back then also it was the same. Now what happened, my parents at the end of all this experimentation found out that I'm good in academics and have an intellectual mindset, therefore I'm best fit for science, right? And therefore science happened very organically for me. And my mom literally made it clear that she's looking at me to be like an IIT graduate from IIT Kharagpur, and I am graduate from I am Calcutta. Coincidentally, both being near to our hometown Kolkata, and so that's very convenient. And very naturally that became my dream as well, because I was always an obedient child wanting to fulfill my parents' aspirations. So I worked towards it. To some extent, I fulfilled that, and it became something which I was able to do for them by joining NIT Durgapur as a chemical engineer, and then going on and directly completing my MBA from IIM Indore. But throughout this period, what happened is I also had my own dreams, right? I always dreamt if I could be something like a cosmologist, a scientist who studies the universe, right? And the research was also possible for me given my intellectual capabilities and my personality. But that was not something which I found enough time to explore. So probably that's something which got left out in the process.
Okay. Got it. So, I mean, you pursued cosmology, or like the ball is dropped, no? Or maybe sometime in future you're going to do that.
Okay. Sometimes I really feel like I tell you, the challenge which happened was I got so engrossed into the process of cracking through engineering, and then directly from NIT I joined MBA at IIM Indore.
Yeah.
So didn't really get time to explore things much, right? At NIT also there were a lot of hardships which I had to go through, more from a financial sustainability standpoint and everything. But again, necessity is the mother of invention, as people say. So I learned a lot of entrepreneurial activities then as well. I worked as a freelancer, and back then I remember at NIT there was this trend of entrepreneurs or startups making explainer videos for their products, and typically explainer videos would cost 40 to 50,000 rupees on an average. What we did is we made a makeshift arrangement of creating these explainer videos, good quality explainer videos, at just 5,000 rupees per product. And that kicked off.
Amazing.
So we made it for like hundreds of products across so many startups, and people really liked it because it's sasta tha, jaldi marketing bhi ho pa rahi hai, and they are able to kind of get good return on investment for that. So they were always happy कि सिर्फ 5,000 है तो चलो कर ही लेते हैं, and 10-12 request एक client से तो आ ही जाते थे. So that was something which was very interesting, and it helped us to sponsor a trip for some of our friends to Goa as well in college. So I think that was my first, touch of the life of an entrepreneur, I would say. And again, it all came out from the necessity of actually getting the basic livelihood sorted. I wanted to pursue, way of living in college, and while it was not really, feasible after a certain point of time to go back to family and press for more support, so I had to do it myself, and I got it done in this way. So I think that's how it started for me.
Interesting. So you were growing up where? Which part of
so West Bengal,
the country?
I'm from West Bengal, Kolkata. And
Kolkata. Okay.
And my engineering also happened in Durgapur, which is just 3-hour journey from hometown. So my mom used to come down every weekend, or would ask me to come back home. Bengali parents are actually very, very possessive about their children. So my mom was just like that, and fortunately.
No, similar story. I think even in Roorkee, there are a lot of people who are from neighboring areas, so either from UP or from Punjab or Delhi, and every weekend they're going back home, except me, who it used to take me 30 hours to go back home. So lambi chutti hoga tabhi jayenge matlab.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of being near home, right? But that's a double-edged sword always, because you don't really get to survive independently for a longer period of time, because that's the intent of college. It helps you grow. Right? So probably that's a double-edged sword.
So while you were growing up, I understand. So basically, whether you want to become an engineer or whatever, it's basically to solve that sort of problem of incoming money to maintain a minimum basic lifestyle. That was the thought which was going on to that's why you became a chemical engineer. Another thing I wanted to double click on, which is quite interesting. So your father moved from a typical salaried class into a business. At what age he took this?
He took it at the age of 42, in fact. Yeah, so pretty old and matured as a professional. In fact, he was heading sales for one of the largest organizations in the commercial vehicle space, and that's when.
So you're saying 42 is pretty old. I'm going to hit it maybe in a few years. So, okay, please continue.
He drew inspiration from the life story of KFC's founder. Startup anytime.
Okay.
So I think.
Okay.
And the core motivation was always that बहुत हो गया कि हमने skills learn किए, खुद किसी और के लिए काम किया, खुद के लिए भी कुछ करते हैं, right? To utilize this for ourselves as well. And I think that was a passion which motivated him, because he knew it all, right? He knew the trade very well, and he had the right networks.
Achha.
It just made sense for him to start.
Got it. Got it. And when he was starting, so both of your parents were working,
No,
or
only dad is working,
okay.
and he had enough savings to think about starting up. Of course, starting up frugally, but that's how it was. And that was coincidentally the time also when I went into MBA. Right. So
Okay.
yeah, so that was a very perplexing transition for us, because MBA maybe it's very expensive if you're taking up a course, but since I
Yes.
had a loan, and we had this understanding that loans get closed by the graduate themselves, so we thought about going ahead with that. And as I told you, we are very big risk takers, so I think that's something
Yeah.
which has always helped us live a fulfilling life, I would say. Because we chose to go ahead and say that, okay, let Papa, you also start up, I will also go into MBA, and then we'll figure it out, whatever, which ways it can, right?
Yeah.
So, there were some hardships for sure,
Amazing.
but we pulled it off.
Yeah. So how long he has been running this EV
For
business
7
now?
years now. And so
7 years now.
there have
Okay.
been a lot of changes, shifts, and what he is doing, how he is doing. Sometimes he was in spare parts, sometimes he was in the full blown vehicle category. Now, what he is doing is he's basically helping the entire ecosystem create a new set of dealers who were earlier otherwise in traditional ecosystems like Piaggios of the world, and selling diesel vehicles or otherwise, right? So that's an unexplored market altogether, and it becomes like a single point of distribution for all EV companies in the commercial.
Amazing. So Vikram, coming back to your story, right? So you did your chemical engineering from NIT Durgapur. What made you? So this is a question a lot of young people have, right? Whether or not to do an MBA. So you went on and did your MBA from IIM Indore. So what's your answer to that question? Why did you took that call, and why did you went for an MBA?
So
and
that's actually a question which I am also trying to figure out for a long period of time, that why did I actually do it? But if you ask me very honestly, what I feel is that number one factor which has always been hooked on to me since childhood was my mom's that one line, right? My child will do an engineering from an IIT Kharagpur and an MBA from IIM Calcutta. So I think personally that has been a very single point of strong motivation for me to pursue MBA as well and close the loop. But yeah, if you ask me logically, when I was in my final year of engineering, I got placed into a company called Mu Sigma. So it was the first company which came on campus, and I frankly did not really want to take up a core job of chemical engineering at that time, because I was not really focused towards that segment. Myriad reasons, but that was not my focus. After 4 years is what I realized. And therefore, I thought about doing something in the non-core segment. And Mu Sigma was a very good company helping us in building a career in data analytics. Thought about taking it up, got through in the first rounds of interviews only. But then I spoke with a lot of friends, and people suggested, in fact, that Vikrant, you should definitely try for an MBA. Till then, honestly, Vivek, I did not really have an understanding about what an MBA degree is all about. What are the options in an MBA degree? And how is life after MBA? I honestly did not even know. And this is, in fact, what I also mentioned in one of my interviews after MBA at a company, Asian Paints, that, honestly, I did not even know what MBA was all about when I had applied for MBA, because they asked me the same question. But the reason why I took up the challenge was because CAT is a tough exam. And I like solving for tough exams, right? So I thought about कि यार MBA करना है कि नहीं करना है वो तो बाद में देखेंगे. एक exam है, it is tough. Let's crack it, and let's see if we can actually crack it or not. Some way or the other, we cracked it. I cracked it, and got an interview from multiple campuses. Was not really prepared for interviews, but fortunately, Indore happened. Now, when that happened, my parents were on my head. यार हो गया है जब तो ले ले, छोड़ मत. I was like कि मुझे अभी पता है कि क्या हुआ है, and now I have an understanding about how I can do better, right? Because first attempt of CAT, it was not that as good as I thought it would have been. I thought that I could do better after a year, maybe after a year of experience in music. But somewhere people heard that यार experience के बाद ना crack करना बहुत difficult हो जाता है. You don't get time to prepare. Go ahead because you have an opportunity. So I would say again, at that very moment of deciding whether to go for an MBA or not, I took a decision just based on what my peers and family told me. For me personally, and yes, obviously the relation of my dad being an entrepreneur, I having that structured mindset to solve problems, at least me believing that I had, and that early childhood passion of mine to fulfill my mom's dreams. Those are always on the backside of things, but that's why I took a decision. There was no personal intent of actually taking up an MBA at all at that very point of time. But things changed when I was in the first year of MBA. When I realized how life is after an MBA and what are the opportunities available, I actually figured out that it's an ocean and I can do so many more things, right? And that's where my passion also clicked over time, because I realized what's on the back of the door of an MBA career once I entered into it, not before that. So, but then as I kept exploring, I loved it, and now I'm an entrepreneur full-time, right? So using all the learnings.
Great. So what and where does the passion for education comes in, right? So you have been after your MBA, I think your first startup was in EdTech space. This startup is in EdTech space. At Redseer, you're advising EdTech client. So how are you able to sort of arrive at this passion, find this passion?
This is a very interesting question. In fact, Vivek, the way I see it is, education is the only industry where I have had a first-hand experience for the entirety of my life, right? From childhood, I've been studying. I have not sold products. I have not, perhaps, gone into the entertainment field and experienced it firsthand for a long time, or any other field, right? Even in technical space, I have not really explored any segment as long as I have explored and understood education as a segment. And I think to certain points, it's common for everyone in the world, right? Education is the only industry with which you are exposed to the largest amount of time in your life, and that's what has always been rewarding as well for you. So personally, that's the single point of motivation to be focused in education, because I know the space. I like to be in a place where I am, having a relatively higher percentage of clarity. That's number one. And second is that you heard my personal story, right? Throughout my journey, the challenge has always been about finding what I really like to do and understanding what's my calling. Even today, I feel that I'm still some steps far away from it, right? So I'm always keeping bridging the gap. So therefore, the understanding that if I am not able to, if I was not able to do it earlier, how can I actually help today's generation figure it out much faster, so that they don't need to explore 4 years of engineering and figure that agar 5 साल का integrated program of management ही कर लिया होता, then I would have been here faster. I would have been speaking with Vivek sir faster than what I could have done, right? How I could have done it. So I think that's the reason why I chose education specifically, primarily because I like to guide people to whatever extent I can.
Got it. So how did I think you started your career with what? Asian Paints?
I started my professional journey with Asian Paints after the MBA. Yes.
Okay. So while at Asian Paints, you were thinking of like ideas on which you can go ahead and work on. I think after Asian Paints, you started Edvise, right?
So very interesting.
How was that process looking like? How was that thought process? Just
so I told you, my dad started up when I joined MBA. So I always had a knack of doing something just like my dad, because he was doing good, and I really looked up to him for inspiration. At least in risk-taking appetite, I would say always just look up to my dad. And if you are afraid about doing anything, just look at his lifestyle and you would know there is nothing to be afraid about. You can do anything.
So
I think that has always been my inspiration, number one. And therefore I had a knack of thinking about creative ways of starting up, doing something of your own, at least learning, if not you're able to earn out of it, right? That's number one. Number two is when I joined Asian Paints happened very organically again. In my summer internship, in MBA, internship process is a chaos. Right? Everyone is after that dream company, which is coming on day 0 or minus, and you just have to be present over there. And life is all the more harder when you are a fresher, just out of college, without any years of experience.
Okay.
And I was a fresher, general engineering male, as you call it, plus a fresher. So it's like life is the toughest of all it can be.
Why do you say it's the hardest for
fresher? It's hardest because companies typically come with a years of experience requirement or expectation for candidates. For example, if you like we were also when looking at candidates internally at Redseer, you remember that we had that experience criteria as well. that someone who is able to relate with what we are doing. Ultimately, we want that kind of a candidate who is a little bit matured in their mindset, right?
But this is quite counter to the people. I don't know. You can tell me about the percentage of people at IIM who are fresher versus experienced. What percentage is that?
It depends on the IIM you are from. However, these days, what I'm seeing is that the trend is going more towards experienced candidates. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Because I've seen a lot of people just going to for an MBA just after engineering. So I was assuming in my mind that the percentage would be much higher.
So I'll tell you, in fact, in my time, the percentage was somewhere, if I'm not wrong, it's somewhere north of 70%, where we were looking at freshers, right, across, in male, female included.
Okay.
Gender diversity was roughly 50-50, but freshers were higher in proportion. And when I say freshers, it includes people who are at least having less than a year experience as well. But now what we see is that the trend is very different. We see it's the other way around, that experienced people are far more than freshers. Freshers are actually a minority now. Perhaps it's also to do with something like the overall awareness regarding companies also requiring experienced candidates to join.
Yeah. Got it. So please continue. So you were saying that the process was a bit difficult there. Being a fresher,
I'll tell you, the expectations are that you are supposed to have some set of understandings about how the world works in professional spheres. You have to have that creative mindset, and you have to stand out from others in a lot of places. You have to have a lot of spikes in your CV, right? So that's one thing which needs to be there, so that you get your desired role in something like a consulting or a finance kind of a role. My requirement specifically was that I want more of a sales and marketing role, where I first want to learn how to sell a product, and then maybe go towards my journey of being an entrepreneur full time. So that was my way of thinking altogether initially. And if not in sales, then probably I would want to explore something in consulting. That was my second. In fact, I would say consulting always held a priority for me. That's why I later shifted to Redseer, because you get to learn so much and so fast. But the reason why it was stressful is that even in sales and marketing, people were expecting experience. And my interview with Asian Paints happened at the end of, I think, one of the early days, the earliest day of our placements. And when we were sitting across, the interviewer asked me that we don't really take freshers. I don't really know, you need to stand out very significantly for us to consider. Now I think Asian Paints has been much more inclusive and overall, but at that time it was very different. So there were certain questions asked, more conceptual, and fortunately I was able to answer at, I think it was at 1 a.m. When the interview closed, and I got in. And once I got in, I think after that I performed well in the internship to prove that freshers can actually do good and contribute significantly. And then I got a PPO. So Asian Paints happened naturally like that. And in fact, inside IIM folks were also pretty much interested to cover my journey and experience, because it was one of the first times, I think, when Asian Paints as a company had hired a fresher. Yeah, so typically they look at experienced candidates. They used to look at, right? Now the trend has changed. But so that's level one which happened. But Asian Paints, I'll tell you what happened is, I learned a lot about sales and marketing. It's one of the fabulous companies to work in, right? Very, very, good teams to work in, and extremely amazing and fulfilling career stream for sure. But at the side, it was always not mine, right? Asian Paints did not belong to me. And I am not doing it, for myself, from an earning standpoint. I am not earning to the fullest. So how can I make myself better skilled so that I can develop this understanding much stronger? So I thought about doing something at the side as well, and education, obviously, because that's where I had the highest amount of clarity. I started Edvise with the thought of helping out, coaching centers create online batches. This is pre-COVID. And, a lot of online educators, or a lot of educators wanted to go online. They did not know the right means to do that. And ClassPlus as a company was picking off at that time very strongly. So Mukul Rustagi, who is the founder, He's done a very fantastic job at that. And I was very interested to know more about what's going on in this online LMS space and what are people actually doing. So I bought a lot of these LMS platforms. They used to come at a low initial price point. And then I used to reach out to a set of my educators. I went back to my own teachers and I said that, hey, if you want to build an online batch, I can help you out. And my friends, colleagues, whoever had a brother or sister, I reached out to them and said that, hey, which teacher are you actually studying from? And if they are a famous person, then I would connect with them and say that, hey, you can build a larger batch online and I can help you in that. So I managed, I took an LMS from a company who was already selling LMS. I did not have any tech value proposition at that time. My value proposition was the learnings from Asian Paints. I know how to sell. I know sales and marketing very well. And fortunately, I became a brand manager at that time. So I knew how digital marketing and 360-degree marketing actually worked. I used those learnings over there and I was able to build a lot of online batches for teachers. I realized a lot of things at that time. In fact, I'll tell you, Vivek, I started speaking directly with parents and heard so many parents speaking, sense about what I could relate with my childhood. Why did my parents take those calls at that time? I understood because of my discussions with the parents of today's children. And that was an eye-opener and even made me more passionate for EdTech as a segment. And I think after that, it was just an innate,
So what were like some of the stories that you were hearing from the parents? What were their expectations?
So brilliantly, it was a resounding point. Every parent was paranoid about their child's future. Every parent even had no clue about how to solve for it, right? Even if they look very confident and, appealing in front of their children about what the student should do or the child should do in their life, they themselves have no clue. And when they open up about that, it shows how worried they are about their children. So the biggest challenge, in fact, one of the stories I'll tell you, in fact, this happened in one of the counseling sessions which I was doing. I also used to counsel students in my part-time. One of the students came up and the parents came up and said that, sir, ये ना हमारी बेटी कोई काम नहीं करती है, हर दिन टाइम पास करती रहती है ऑनलाइन एंड पढ़ाई में ध्यान नहीं है, सर आप कुछ बोलिए ताकि इसका पढ़ाई में ध्यान जाए. आई ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड कि ऑनलाइन क्या करते हो. So turns out that the child was an influencer earning 80,000 per month. Yeah.
Wow.
And the parents are actually, interested to push their child into studies by closing down everything on the social media side. I said, "Ye disaster hai. Naturally, your child has become such a successful entrepreneur herself. And why do you want to take it away from her? In fact, find out things which would accentuate her life further, right?" So these are very interesting stories, and I can talk about hundreds of such stories which I've come across in the entire past 4 years of counseling. And this always motivates me to become the advocate of the child, because children today are much more mature than how we were perhaps at our times. They know what's right or wrong. They have that exposure. A lot of times they don't understand, but at least relatively, if you see, right, we were far, rudimentary in this part of our understandings. All the more important for us to inculcate the right set of directioning so that they know how to achieve their best potential. So that's where, the interest to explore more in this space.
Got it. So taking a step back, right, coming back to Edvise, right? Edvise, you were so basically connecting the professors with the teachers and all the studies happening online. There was some monetization there.
Yeah. So I was a marketing agency for all coaching centers. That's essentially how Edvise was.
Achha.
Yeah.
Okay. And this the coaching that they are doing, that is happening online. So maybe over a Zoom or something.
So
the kids are coming online.
So it would happen either on a Zoom or it would happen on an LMS like a Class Plus or Class Pro. There are so many more in the market today.
Got it. And which year was it you were working on?
This was in 2018 and 2019. Say I started, and then when COVID happened, it just loaded up at that point as well later.
Yeah, that is what I was assuming. So just with COVID, it would have just gone through the roof.
In fact, I remember I made a batch of 1,000 students for a tutor in one single month. So it was as high as that as well, right? Of course, me having the limited capacity of mine in my own free time, I was the only marketer. I would do social media ads. I would connect with the leads myself. I would speak with them. I would do the closing, and I would get the batches made. All while I was also having a full-time job where I had to commit at least 10 hours.
So this was one-person company. Edvise was a one-person
I had one
company.
more person who was helping me, but this was just a one-person company at the end of the day, at least in the initial phase for sure.
Okay, and running in parallel with Asian Paints. Did you at some point went full time in Edvise, or you just maintained it as a side hustle?
At one point, in fact, that was a transition point for me when I was doing fairly well at Asian Paints. I was, we recently launched a brand called Viro Protect at that time, and my boss had suggested that, Vikrant, why don't you handle certain of the stuffs over there as well as a brand manager, right, from the brand side. So it was the first time when I got to move from a product like waterproofing to a product which is more FMCG, right, which is hand sanitizers. So it was very exciting for me, but I had to take a very tough call that was it my choice of career trajectory which I want to actually pursue? Is it something, do I see myself as an FMCG focused, brand manager per se or marketer per se? I figured that it's not a space where I have the highest amount of clarity. Of course, I'll get to learn a lot. And it's not a space where I personally relate a lot, right? I don't really relate with FMCG to that extent as much as I relate with other spaces of life. Not just education, it's also EVs, it's also the leather industry. One of my close family friends is also in it, so I learned a lot about the leather industry, the e-commerce space as well. That was something which was booming at that time, and I really wanted to understand what goes online. And I wanted to understand something which is tech enabled and tech related, because that's a way in which you can impact a larger audience at a shorter period of time, right? Anything which is non-tech driven, it takes a longer time to rotate. So that's where I had to take a very tough call that what should I do? And at the hindsight, I always knew that कुछ भी नहीं हुआ तो advice में कर रहे हैं, business बन रहा है, पैसे आ जाएंगे, right? So financially, that at that very moment, it was not a really tough call for me. But I also understood one thing, that Edvise was not a scalable venture. Edvise is me being a marketing agency for small coaching centers, just like maybe Ogilvy is a marketing agency for bigger brands like AP, HUL, and so on, right? So if I had an AP in hand and I had hundreds of such APs or HULs, I would have maybe thought about building that. But since I'm looking at educators who are rudimentary and it takes a lot of priming for them to first close and then go ahead and build batches and then be prepared to handle that batch strength, right? That too online, where digital literacy is so very weak in the country. So being a product is easier. Being a marketing service provider is tougher. So I thought about halting over there. Fortunately, that's when Rohan from Redseer had reached out as well, and he said that Vikrant, we are doing some exciting work in the internet consulting space. Why don't we have a chat? And I loved the understanding that I could learn a lot about multiple markets, specifically EdTech, because I told Rohan at that point that EdTech is my passion point. I want to learn more about it. So can we do something around that? He said, "हाँ, हो सकता है, बात करते हैं." And then when in my last call with Anil, I remember. I told Anil that, Anil, I might just leave Redseer in about 2 years. I left Redseer, in fact, in 1 year, 10 months. So I told him then only that I might leave Redseer in 2 years, but I want to learn more, and I'm looking at it as a learning for me. He was very, far-sighted and open to welcome the Redseer family. And I think since then, my journey has taken a very different trajectory and a different pace altogether, for sure.
Yeah. Redseer, I think we have a lot of entrepreneurs at Redseer. People who have tried, burned their hands, came back, went back again. So, and I think I feel that the culture is very, very entrepreneurial as well. Even if you are at Redseer, I have been there for so long, right? There is so much of independence to do the things the way you want to do, which is just amazing.
100%. So hustle nature, right? And the nature of doing what you feel is right and experimenting. That experimentation is very much alive, and that's what that's what drove me also, right? Because most of our clients were always looking for some innovative outcomes, and my managers would always say, "Vikrant, tu dekh le, kar le." And then when we would discuss, they would point it out, right? This is where you're going wrong. This is where you're right. and it would be a very active mentoring. As I say, today in Acadspace also we have a lot of advisors helping us out in a similar fashion, and now I can relate so much more that every project for me was like an entrepreneurial stint. So that was very interesting.
Yes. So maybe taking a step back, right? So you left Asian Paints and you were working on Edvise. How long you were working on Edvise before you moved to Redseer?
1.5 years. Roughly.
1.5 years. And did you build a team? How was that 1.5 year journey when it comes to
Edvise was more from a learning perspective again for me.
Okay.
I did not intend to build a team over there because I knew that if this is not a sustainable journey which I am planning anyway, I should not build a team and raise expectations of others and take their dependency on me, because it just not justifies for the others as well, right? Why would someone take out time and come over for me? Although having said that, I took a lot of interns and burned my hands over there to figure out that how can interns help me build Edvise. And in some cases it worked out really well. In fact, one of the interns who worked with me was also one of the first developers of Acadspace. So that went really well. And we always tried to productize this marketing funnel creations, as I call it today. Frankly, that time I did not have the right team to build it. If we could have productized those marketing funnels to some extent, if I could have seen an MVP clicking over there, today maybe Acadspace ki jagah we would have been looking at Edvise, build up and automate. Today a lot of companies like Obi, for example, is doing exactly what I was doing at Edvise that time. So it had to happen. Someone had to solve it, but maybe that was not my right time, or my level of knowledge was not enough to solve for that pain point at that time. And therefore it was just like an agency, right? It's limited to scale because it's people driven. If I am not there, who would run the campaigns and get those outcomes, right? If I'm not there to take the call, who would take the calls in the way I am taking? Of course, there are people who can take it and run it, right? But that kind of structuring and that kind of an organized approach was not really what I could take at that very moment. Therefore, we thought.
So quite interesting. So you were basically taking this plunge more for your own learning about how to become an entrepreneur than to sort of try to push through and just try to make it big as you
in
can.
In fact, moonlighting, one major reason why I encourage people to obviously moonlight. All my current employees also, I always encourage whoever wants to do will do it. Whoever doesn't want to do it's fine. But I say that apne 10 hours ke job ke baad, you should always explore something which you can do. Today also, every Friday with our team, 9-member team we have at Acadspace, we always keep discussing what you can do for your benefits, right? The tech team always discusses that, and the sales team as well. That what can we do so that you become skilled enough to run someday your own venture? And they say that, Vikrant, looking at you, we get some understanding. Looking at others' stories, we get understanding, but we don't really know how to do it for ourselves. So that is also something which is work in progress internally for our own employees. And the reason why I do it is because I have learned it myself, right? I started up as a moonlighting guy. Before that also in college, I used to moonlight only, right? College was regular 10 hours and then whatever you do is for yourself. So that has been a nature for me. That always try to learn something additional which can perhaps give you some outcomes. So I think that's very important.
So what I was checking for Vikrant was that after Edvise, you joined Redseer and you are working with various EdTech companies, right? So somebody watching this podcast and is interested to sort of understand what happens in consulting, whether or not to choose this career, and what has been like some of your learnings while being in this job. So if you can just sort of talk a little bit about it.
In Redseer, I think it was very adventurous for me. Of course, the kind of learnings, not only in EdTech, right, in a lot of industries, including short form content, e-commerce, logistics, D2C, learned a lot. SaaS as well. Today, in fact, I'll tell you, majority of what Acadspace is doing, right, has come from the insights which I learned while I was in Redseer. Because at Redseer, when we used to do a lot of research about the EdTech space, few things came out as a learning, right? First of all, I learned to structure the market. Market is not EdTech. Market में बहुत सारे जगह हैं. There is K-12 EdTech, there is K-12 में B2C, B2B, there is a B2G segment as well, there is higher education, there is upskilling, lifelong learning, and so much more, right? There is then you can look at the Bloom taxonomy and you can see that EdTech in itself is a world and not just a small segment or industry in itself. But unfortunately, the challenge outside of Redseer, what I found is the awareness is very limited. You would see people thinking EdTech is Byju's and that's it, right? Or maybe EdTech is an academy per se, because these are the large players who have really made a fabulous mark of their own in the industry. So I feel that awareness bit about first knowing the market is what I learned while in Redseer. I understood how the market is broken down, compartmentalized into different categories, and how big each of those categories are. Right? And every category had so many personas and so many different nuances, having their own pain points altogether. So overall, if I am to say, my core learnings in Redseer were about how to look at the market. I understood that to some extent. Second, how big the market is, various nitty-gritties about different pain points, those things I learned. And third is about, if I am to do something, right, what should I prioritize? The mental model for that is also very important. Because today at Acadspace, what do? We are Google Map for career preparation, right? But for whose career preparation? That's the main question. Today we can be the Google Map for anyone's career preparation. How do you therefore that pipeline and say that, hey, this is my first market of priority where I should go and build a business, and then I will just keep organically growing. That came out when we looked at K-12, for example, right? So when I looked at K-12 market, and I had that experience of forming online batches for all coaching centers as well, resounding answer was, हमें नहीं पता अपने बच्चे के करियर में क्या उनको करना चाहिए, and how should we solve for that. The market from a career counseling standpoint was also structurally not in shape, because you're looking at counseling as a one-time affair. We made it as a year-long affair, and fortunately today we are scheduled to work with 900 schools in the country, spans across 3.5 lakh paid customers. So that's basically validation in itself that career counseling is not supposed to be a single point of time activity, right? It's supposed to be a guidance throughout the journey. You are hand-holding the child and not really giving crystal ball gazing predictions. So I think that's all which came from Redseer.
Got it. So when did the idea of Acadspace hit you, and when did you started working on that idea?
So I'll tell you, there are multiple bits and pieces which has come onto it. In fact, apart from Redseer, one community where I'm very active is my IIM Indore alumni network. And the alumni over there are super supportive. I mean, people who are like 10, 15 years elder to me, they are my closest friends today in terms of a professional relationship and beyond, if I am to say, right? So they look at me and say that, Vikrant, yaar, tu nahi karega to hum kar lenge. That's how, discussions really happened for Acadspace. And I'm very, very fortunate that they also became one of my early backers. So Pranav Agarwal, Harshad, Sachani, these are a few folks, and Deepak Bhatia as well. These are three people who have been very, very supportive for me. And Harshad, in fact, runs his own career counseling entity called Career Mentors in Nagpur. So how we met, I'll tell you. While I was in Asian Paints, I used to actively take part in IIM Indore alumni engagements as well. And that's where we formed an internal association of committee members who would really, facilitate these events and organize meetups. That's where I met Pranav, Harshad, Deepak Bhai. I met Vaibhav Jain as well. I met Shrishti as well. All of us, we became very good friends. Soham as well. Right? So if I don't take a single name, people might just get offended sometime later when this becomes very viral. Right? So just ensuring that, having the tick on all the names. But they have been more of friends and actively connected with me. And I used to share a lot of my insights with them. Right? I'm very vocal about whatever I've learned. One thing that, if people are here to learn about entrepreneurship and understand my experience is, you should never really be afraid about sharing what's there in your mind. Even if someone replicates it, it's fine. Market is, right? And we two more people doing the same shit and it's fine. Because if not today, if it's an idea which is worth the salt, then it would anyway be replicated. Right?
Yeah, my hypothesis is that, we are such a large country, whatever the idea that you think is original, there are already 10 people working on it.
And in fact, I'll tell you, when we started Acadspace, we actually found out 2-3 people who have already burned their hands with Acadspace kind of models and failed. And there are 2 more people who are globally successful as well. So we found that out. हमें लगा कि it's very innovative, something किसी ने नहीं सोचा है, but actually it's not true. लोगों ने किया है, and it's true with everything as well, right? So that's why I always kept sharing wherever I got an opportunity, whenever I got an opportunity. In Redseer also, I used to share a lot with Abhishek, Kushal, Mukesh as well, because we used to actively engage over projects. And in these sharings, I got a lot of learnings, right? So all these learnings told me that what I was doing in Edvise was half-baked, right? There needs to be a central node of trust building, which is a process-driven activity and not a people-centered activity, right? I am not the one who is supposed to build trust in the minds of the parents, because if you are trusting me, then only you will convert for the batch. Otherwise, you won't. And the single node of trust can only be built if I know your child very well, and if I'm able to build a guidance mechanism for your child as per your satisfaction, and then give recommendations in the process. So kind of, I would say Acadspace is an evolved understanding of what we were doing in Edvise. We call it a SaaS plus marketplace model. Just like how a Class Plus is also running, I draw inspiration from their businesses a lot. But in Acadspace, what we do is use career guidance for an entire year to build the trust in the minds of the parents that we know your child very well and we'll only recommend what's right for them, right? And at the back end, then there is a huge preparation, commerce which is going on, where we have a dedicated marketplace which gives personalized recommendations of courses, certifications, competitions, internships, etc. for your child according to their needs, right? It's no faff. And it is nothing which, relates to a mis-selling happening. Today, a lot of mis-selling happens in the market where people resort to fear of failure, missing out, and whatever other concepts are there, and try to sell something which you don't really need. We don't do that, because our system is designed to help you in a way that only you only get those things which you need, and not something which is not required for you per se. So I think that evolution happened with over time while I was in Redseer, and some time before also. Since then only, when we started working with the alumni committee as well.
Got it. So when did you finally took that plunge? How was that process looking like? How did you thought through ki now is the right time to do this? Like, how many months into the venture that you decided
in Redseer, life is very hectic, right? You don't really, if you love the project, right? Ideally, you would not even find a second of time outside of the project whenever you're in your working hours, right? Because you need to be that much mentally engrossed because you're loving to do it, right?
That's a part of a consulting job.
It's common everywhere. And if it's your passion, then all the more you would organically just get drifted away, right? But even in that, it's very important to take a step back and understand that how is your long-term development. And I think this is one activity which in Redseer also we took up very positively, which is the connection between your manager and you, or your mentor and you, to understand where your long-term development as a careerist is also going, right? So those were the pockets of times when I used to actually self-introspect and figure out that there is a certain lacuna which is there. What I had thought about that I would build as learning in 2 years, I think I'm there to a certain extent. Is it the right time therefore to now do an analysis and figure out that what should be the right formula to start up, right? And exactly as I told you, I put down my papers after 1 year, 10 months. And that's when I started experimenting, right? I started experimenting right when I put down my papers, or a little bit one month before that, about what can be done to accentuate what we were doing in Edvise, right? How can counseling be automated? What are the mechanisms? How to build the MVP for it? And more importantly, how to find the right team. Because team building has been a Achilles heel for every startup. And fortunately, I found one of our developers who was earlier an intern for me. He said that, Vikrant, I'll help you again. And he came in with very minor monetary expectations. Then I literally did. So I used the Naukri Resdex access very, very effectively. I actually made 400 calls from there, and figured out not 400 calls specifically from Resdex, but some part of it was from there, where I figured out that who are the right people to kind of tap into, and ask them to join my company. I after doing 400 calls with technical guys, developers, and so on, I found out the right fit for my team. One of my guys, Arunavu, he's an IIT Bombay grad and fantastic guy in terms of statistics knowledge, in terms of knowledge about development, and he has worked with AI as well. So we were thinking about making it AI enabled, right? This is pre-chat GPT, which I'm talking about. We were thinking, right, that AI can solve this problem of knowing the child well and then maybe giving personalized recommendations. So yeah, I think that went well. We got in good guys.
Got it. So you are saying, so basically you decided that, okay, you have to move out, you have to put more time on this, probably this next iteration of Edvise. I think what is very, very interesting is hiring the first team, right? So, which I think is quite difficult. As you also said, right, Ki, you are basically you're on the journey of building something which is still like, let's say, not proven yet. You don't have enough money to also, so you had, where were you sort of raising these funds to pay the salary of yourself and other people? How were you solving for that?
I did not leave Redseer till the time I had a working prototype available, right? And till the time I actually went to first 10 schools and said that, hey, this is what I am building. Are you interested? They said yes. And I said, okay, now it's time. And as I told you, my IIM Indore alumni have been very supportive. So they gave that initial seed funding. We raised 50 lakhs, not more than that, but in 50 lakhs in the last 1 year, we built a product, built a team of 9 people now, right? Revenue positive, and built a traction of 900 plus schools pan India. So, yeah.
Got it. So in terms of order, you basically developed that MVP, you went out to the market, you sold, you got enough clients onboarded, and you were able to raise funding, and then you started looking to hire through the ResTech thing and other reach outs that you were doing.
So hiring actually happened before. So hiring actually happened.
Achha.
One person which I hired actually happened before I built the MVP, because I had to get something on the plate to show to the customers. Right? It's a chicken and egg. I go with a concept to a customer, they take me very casually for it. If I go with something which is working and I say that I want to make it better, and maybe I'll empanel you to be one of my advisors to make this better, and you can be part of the bigger picture, that's when it becomes more exciting for people. They take it more seriously. So,
and for this first hire, you were putting in your personal money to pay them salaries.
Yes, correct. So I had a small savings. I was dipping into that and saying that take it as a 3-month project and get it done. And if after 3 months we fare well, then let's go ahead and build it together. That's how we did it.
Got it. So, how did you, let's say, I think you started building the team, but does this initial team is your co-founding team, or you were looking for a co-founder as well while on this journey? How did you find your co-founder?
So I think co-founder happened when, it happened 2022 November. That's when one of my alumni, again, he is basically co-founder of a company called Financier, Sunat Tajbir. He helped out by saying that, hey, I know this fabulous person, Jinal Trivedi. She has been working with us and has risen to the ranks of a vice president of sales. She would be a good fit. Why don't you start discussing with her? Because the business model which we had and the network on which Jinal had been working were very similar. And she was anyway already, she had transitioned and doing something of her own, in the process of starting up. But she was in two minds about what needs to be done and not. So we spoke for a couple of months, and in fact this is pre-November in fact, where we started speaking and understanding each other's intents, motivations, figured that it's a good fit, right? From a skills perspective, from an intent perspective. And that's when I found my co-founder who would handle the sales outreach part, because I cannot do everything on my own. But did I start with a co-founder? No, because it wasn't really necessary at that very point. And anyway, the intent for me was not really to gun for fundraise from the get-go. The intent was to first find out whether we are solving a problem or not, right? And for that, you don't need big billions of funds or anything like that. For a guy like me, I have loans on my head. I have my family who is, always experimenting entrepreneurship. And even then, I thought about taking this risk because we are high risk takers. So I think the whole motivation was to find out the problem solution and then maybe look at making it big. And I think that's what has proven effective for us.
Got it. So, how did you? We discussed hiring the initial team. We discussed finding the co-founder. What are your thoughts when it comes to funding? When, how, and at what stage, or even let's say not somebody should look for funding? What's your thoughts on funding overall?
See, the way funding happened for me, and I'll tell you, funding is just like finding your life partner or finding a fund, investor. Finding an investor would be just like, how Pranav says, finding a life partner or finding a job as well, right? Because you need to build trust that you are capable of doing it and you are solving a big problem. And then only if people are in line with what your intents are, then only they'll get on track with you. That's how life works, right? Funding is not different at all. You're not selling anything over there. Of course, you're selling. Nothing happens without selling. But you're there to build trust in their hearts that, see, this is what I'm doing, and if you're passionate enough, join me. The way you can contribute is not with your time, but with your money, right? That's how early stage funding works, right? That's how you get to angel investors and say that if you are passionate about what I'm doing, please help me out, right? Because I'm solving for what you have also aspired. So that's one way of doing fundraiser on the angel side is what I've learned. Now, when you're looking for a more institutional level of fundraising, right, you need to have a proven model that works. You need to have a proven model that's profitable, especially in the current scenario. If you look at how funding thesis has changed overall, you would see that growth-focused funds are really they are themselves pivoting their thesis and saying that we are more profit-focused now. Of course, there are certain funds who are still, high on innovation-led businesses and growth-led businesses. But you would see the end point is, आपको profitable होना है. People are looking to reduce their risk exposure, and that's but obvious because पैसे burn करके business नहीं बनते हैं, value देकर business बनता है. Does not mean that you have to show profits in your bank from the get-go. You have to have a path to profitability. That's what matters, right? And as long as you have a path to profitability, which is sound, which makes sense. I was just reading one of these very interesting ebooks which came out, Fire Starter, the journey of a growth consultant or a growth manager in a company. That has been very interesting for me to go through. One of our alums only just posted about it on LinkedIn, and I would recommend that people do go through it. I was reading through it since today morning, just before our podcast, and I really loved that book. It really helped understand, and that's exactly how it should be, how unit economics looks like, right? CM2 level kya hota hai, CM1 level kya hota hai. If you're running an online business, you need to be on top of your knowledge in this, and then investments are not really that tough.
Got it. But for you so far, you're mostly looking at your own network when it comes to raising your angel rounds.
Really. So I tell you, angels are always great. Your own network is always great, I would say, to help you with immediate requirements. So आपको पता है अगर there were times, of course, right, in the last 1 year where मुझे पता नहीं है कि next month की salary कहाँ से आएगी, right? मुझे नहीं पता. And honestly, there is no shame in accepting that. There have been such times. Runways have been crunched, but that's when you bank on your network and say that, sir, this is where we are, but we know in the next 2 months this is where we are going to be. So help us out, right? And that's when people come in. And once one person starts coming in, right, then you can always build trust on that this person has trusted me. So there is all the more reason that you can also trust me in this. That's how your internal network always helps you out in the moments of distress, and you give them the reward which they deserve. Along with that, it's not that we have always gone to our internal networks. We have actually reached out to external investors as well. We are in talks with a lot of institutional VCs as well. We have closed one of our institutional investors as well. It's not really out there yet.
Wow, congratulations.
But yeah, definitely. And that's a seed round which we have raised. The idea has also been very similar over there, right? Go and meet them. Speak about what you're doing. It can be a cold outreach. That's all fine, right? A lot of good discussions which I have had have happened through cold outreaches as well. And a lot of it depends on you networking with the right crowd. You need to be in the right group, speaking the right things in front of people and actually matching their wavelength. Because if you do that, then people really look up to you and say that, hey, I feel that you can build something. Let me help you out in it, right? At the end of the day, it's all about that. Investors, I would say in India specifically, are very emotionally driven. So emotions speak much more than numbers, right? Numbers are always there. It's important. It's required to take a rational decision, but emotions are always required to take the right decision.
Yeah, that trust thing is the most important thing. So a few follow-up questions on these, Vikrant, right? I mean, take that in the order that you want to, right? I think one thing which is coming out, which I see coming out very clearly, that you are a very high-risk individual, right? You have a loan, you don't know when the salaries are going to be paid, whether you have the funding or not, but you're sort of going on, right? So how have you been able to develop that high-risk mindset, right? There are different ways of thinking about it. Let's say Tim Ferriss talks about, and the others also talks about, think about your worst case scenario, right? If that is not worse enough, then you're just good, right? That's one way. So if you can probably talk about that. The second thing I would want to understand a bit more on is how is Acadspace sort of solving this problem? If you can sort of talk a little bit about it, how you're using AI to solve this like serious problem, right? It's a serious problem for any parent. I'm also a parent, so I keep thinking about which direction my kids' career should go into, right? And basis your first and now second venture, what are like 2 or 3 things which an entrepreneur should be mindful of while getting onto this journey?
Super. Okay, there is taking part, right? There is a difference between taking risks, blindly and taking calculated risks. So what I feel is, to my best extent, what I have always tried to do is take calculated bets. Understand that you always have to have 3-4 options, alternatives, backups available. I'll give you an example. In fact, very interestingly, a few months back, while this issue of runway had happened, I already had a backup. Ki agar kuch bhi nahi hua, then there is this one company which is in the college space, a very big company. They had offered me acquisition option as well. So, and I had negotiated a deal with them that, okay, if nothing works out, I would want you to take in all my 9 employees, take me in, pay back all my investors, whatever amount they have invested, and I'll work with you, right? And I need this salary and everything, whatever it is, right? For every of my teammates, I told. And I'm being very honest about it, right? So this happened, and I knew that is always a backup which I can go on to. And in that, keeping that in hand, I then went all out because I had nothing to lose now, right? So I went all out and I figured out 3-4 ways of actually surviving and thriving in the space, because I know it's all about managing your cash flows at the end of the day in entrepreneurship early stage. And how you manage your cash flows speaks volumes about you as an entrepreneur as well. So I thought about, getting that investment in maybe from my investors, getting some early payments in from our customers and clients. Unfortunately, I don't know how this also happened, but we have built very good friendships with a lot of school owners and investors in the market, school-related people who have trusted us blindly and said that, okay, July mein shuru ho gaya, yaar, tu abhi paise le le, chala apna banda, and hame July mein service kar, koi issue nahi. So those are the things which have happened with us, and they have given us recommendations. They have said that go to 5 more places, I'll tell you how to do things. And it's been fantastic when the entire world works for you, right? And that all happens when you have the intent and you're like that struggling fish, trying to struggle and figure out where you can find breathing space. And it's not just for me, also for my co-founder, my entire team. We are people who are obnoxiously gunning towards achieving greater heights and doing whatever it takes to get there, right? And if you have a team with that mindset, I don't really feel any levels of risk are worth not taking. It's always worth the jump. So go ahead and take it. That's what my thought is around this part, right?
Got it.
Of course, calculated risks. Now, second was about how Acadspace is solving a problem with AI, right? So need to understand very specifically about Acadspace. Then we are solving not only career discovery, but career preparation and overall personality development. And when we are doing that, the first step about it is actually identifying those issues. If you go to a doctor, when they read your report, they need to first identify aapko issue kya hai, right? And if you are you look at us as a doctor for careers, look at us as a practitioner who is helping you identify कि आपके personality या आपके overall development में कहां पर और बेहतर आप कुछ कर सकते हो. इशू कुछ नहीं है, बट बेहतर आप क्या कर सकते हो. The first step always is to identify that, and second step is to give those resources which can help it improve. So think of Acadspace, the IP of Acadspace, to be like, we know your child very well by identifying these lacuna points and gaps. And number two is we help your child get the right and most relevant resources which will help them develop these activities. So entrepreneurship, for example, risk taking, for example, right? There is this Holland's principle which we use, where enterprising trait is what we target and tap into very deeply. And a person who is more enterprising is supposed to be highly motivated and risk taking in nature, needs to go through the mile and getting their job done. And we help them by understanding that, okay, if you are a higher risk taker, these are the activities which would further help you develop a career around that. And if you are not a high risk taker, there is a certain threshold which is required in every career, wherever you are, right? How do you build it, right? How do you develop that mindset for it? We give those recommendations, those resources, activities, workshops, courses as well via our partners, which helps them.
Got it. So basically, if I'm understanding very broadly, high level, right, there are two things, right? Number one is that you are trying to do some, let's say, screening, some tests to understand where this child is good at, not so good at. And now you have also mapped all the careers basis these few, let's say, structures, right? And basis that you're able to connect the dots and say, okay, that this is where the sort of linkage is the strongest, and basis this, these are the 5 things you should be doing to arrive there. And if I understand also from our earlier discussion is that you're also sort of monitoring this continuously to ensure कि मतलब वो जो शुरू में diagnose किया था वो बिल्कुल अलग नहीं निकल जाए, and we are making the right corrections while we are on the way.
Just like a Google Map navigation, right? अगर आपको left अभी लेना है तो हम आपको अभी बोलते हैं कि आप left लो. अगर आप लेफ्ट मिस कर जाते हो तो बाद में भी जाके आप लेफ्ट ले सकते हो टुवर्ड्स योर डेस्टिनेशन.
Reroute
करना, course correct करना. So we help in that as well. So that's how the AI works.
Amazing, great stuff, man. Jumping on the third question, right, which was what has been like some of the, let's say, 3 key learnings as an entrepreneur that you would want to advise your own younger self who was starting up, let's say 5 years down, 3-4 years down the line.
3 key learnings, right? So first is always, I think my learning, I would say, is there have been so many learnings. I'm just trying to figure out which one to prioritize over the other.
Just go ahead with the flow.
I would say that primary learning which has come out over here is whenever I have tried to do something without the right team, I have seen that failures are coming in, right? And it's not a function of maybe the idea not being worth it to pursue, or maybe the market not being ready for it. It's not that. It's about you not having the right team to execute. That's it. So just maybe build a better team before you start up, or at least have the right people in your mind with whom you want to work, or the right kind of people you want to work with in mind when you're starting up, right? That makes a lot of difference. So that's number one. Number two, I think, is always I have prioritized clarity over maybe just mindless jumping in. So maybe be clear to a great extent on paper, right before you start working. Of course, a lot of things change, right? A lot of things have actually changed with us as well, while we were also implementing and executing on ground. But that initial level of clarity which we had, right, always gave us the purpose and directioning to be towards that one single point of outcome we want to pursue. So that has not changed yet. And therefore the need to pivot and be flexible, right, does not really come out that strongly as an anecdote when you're starting with a clarity of mind. And lastly, I feel be flexible irrespective of the scenario, right? No matter what happens, your core agenda has to be survival. Thrive आप तभी करोगे जब आप आज survive करते हो. So, and in order for survival, you need to find out whatever works for you, right? Just like I told you about that one time when we actually had that crunch and we still figured out acquisition approach, where at least everyone would not be having any losses. People would cut their losses, salaries would still go on, because you are loyal, you are true to your customers, you are true to your employees at the end of the day, and that's what matters the most, right? all about your vision and yourself comes later. What comes first is your responsibility. So yeah, be mindful of that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Vikrant. Has been a pleasure hosting you today. I think before we close in, any book recommendations that you've had for entrepreneurs, could be a business or otherwise?
Right. So I think 0 to 1 is one very interesting book which I had read by Peter Thiel. Yeah. So that's one which I would recommend for people. Of course. Then there is one more book which I had read. I'm not able to. So it's how to run a startup or how to build a startup without the bullshit. So that's a very interesting book. I am not able to recollect the writers.
I'll put the links in the description. I'll figure that out.
Super. So that's something which has been very helpful for me as well to learn about. And third, I think after today's morning, exposure which I had for that particular book, it's the Firestarter ebook. I'll share the ebook link with you as well, maybe after this call, so you can also put it down. It helps you structure a lot of things which otherwise people don't understand very well, right? So I think these are 3 books which I would suggest would be very helpful.
Cool. Great. Thank you so much, Vikrant. Has been a pleasure. Hopefully we'll have more of these discussions, and wishing you a lot of success. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Vivek. Take care.